At the end of the day, your stress level is still net positive. And if you're not able to sleep and recover because of that high stress or because of any other issue, then you're not going to recover adequately. And what many of us do is we are at that point at the end of the day and we just want a glass of wine, or we just want a drink, or we just want a beer. And that's going to disrupt our sleep and make it even worse for the morning.
Welcome to Working Women Mentor, the podcast that delivers mentorship in every conversation. Each episode, we meet remarkable women who share the real moments, challenges, and breakthroughs that shape their journeys. These are stories that inspire, empower, and remind us of what is possible. I'm your host, Rani Alfers, and I cannot wait for you to meet today's guest. Let's jump in and uncover your next mentor moment. Hey everyone, welcome to Working Women Mentor. If you have ever even thought about the words burnout, this episode is for you because we get to meet Dr. Camilla Moore today. She is diving deep into what burnout is, how we can combat stress, and her time from her many years of running her chiropractic services, seeing the stress in patients, seeing how our bodies can just break down because of everything around us. She became intensely curious about what she could do to help. And as a guest lecturer at Brown Medical School, she's helping even young folks learn what burnout is and how to avoid it. So how many of us would have loved to have these skills, these tools so long ago? I know that I'm thankful to meet Camilla and hear everything she says in this episode, because you're going to walk away feeling like you know how to at least approach this, who to reach out to if you can't, and learn a little bit of the science behind what we're feeling, what we're dealing with, and how we can do better. Let's dive in and meet Dr. Camilla Moore. Here we go. Okay, so Camilla Moore, thank you for joining us on Working Women Mentor today. We're excited for you to be our guest mentor. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you for asking. I love our conversation. We started the podcast just offline for a minute. All real world stuff, losing work we're working on, 20,000 windows open on our computer. Love this conversation already. So I'm glad you're here with us today. We have a lot to talk about. But first, could you introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. My name is Dr. Camilla Moore. I am a stress management resiliency trainer. I teach and coach online and have a couple courses that I teach and do one-on-one mentoring.
That's all. You just said that. That's all I do. That's it.
Camilla, and it's wonderful. I love it.
Well, you have such a hot topic. I mean, everyone is thinking about stress and burnout right now, but I'm curious, what led you to this field? I mean, you're chiropractor, women's health, just general health. What started you down this path?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I had a private practice for many years. I've been practicing, I think this is my 17th year, which just does not seem real.
It flies by.
It just flies by. And yet I haven't aged today. So weird. I had my private practice. That was a very successful practice, multi-six-figure business. I sold that in 2018. So with chiropractic, there's a few different specialties that you can go into. And I always did stress-related, kind of soft tissue-related issues. So I did a lot of myofascial release, a lot of body work in that sense. And so I kind of came at stress from the outside in. And as I went through my career, I got a board certification in lifestyle medicine. And one of the pillars of lifestyle medicine is stress management. And so I started studying it from the inside out. And I love that a lot more. And also I went through my own burnout, after COVID, and I had my child during COVID and working through that. It was really hard. I was working for a hospital system at the time. And so I knew I wanted to pivot and be able to be more present as a parent, but also be able to be more present for my clients. And it was just too much energy between everything. And so I took the leap about a year ago.
I think it's so interesting because you're practicing, you're seeing a daily, you're seeing people come into your practice that are greatly affected by stress and pain and everything else. It affects every area of our life, obviously. And you made this connection and then this leap. And now this is your full-time business, isn't it?
Full-time gig, yes.
So I have to ask, so you started the practice, you built this incredible company, and then you sold it. What was that like for you? Because often it's a huge change for folks who are exiting something, that's their baby in a sense.
Yeah, I don't get that question often, but it's an interesting answer. So one, from like a business standpoint, it was a huge accomplishment. Like just to be able to start something from scratch and grow it to a place where somebody else saw value in it and was willing to pay money for it. That was it was an accomplishment and it felt really good. By the time I sold it, I was really tired. I was just exhausted. I wouldn't say that I was burnt out 100%, but I was definitely on my way. And I've talked to other healthcare providers that have gone through a similar path. And we've all kind of done something similar, which is like we kind of get out of the responsibility part of whatever that was for us. And we immediately kind of go into doing something else that has nothing to do with healthcare. And if you're a healthcare provider, there's two parts. There are, the caregiving part for your patients, but there's the business of healthcare where you're dealing with like the insurance companies and the quotas and all of those things. And that's the piece that gets people. And so, we still want to give, we still want to contribute to the world, but many of us tend to kind of take a step back and say, maybe I should open a coffee shop. I started just designing t-shirts just because just like full of love and positive vibes and stuff. Not because I had any intention of selling it, just because like I needed a place
outlet.
To park all of that. So, a couple of different sides of that answer there, but it was a really good feeling.
And you deserve it after all the hard work and building that practice. I love that it was gratifying for you.
It was.
You said that, I wasn't quite burnout 100%. So I feel like you have a scale, 1 to 100 of completely burnt out. I mean, so many people experience this. And like, what are signs that you had, or how did you start to realize like that other side of the business or these pieces of the business are really draining me and that percentage is growing?
Well, it helps to look at burnout as a chronic issue, not so much an acute problem. And so it happens little by little. And I think women in particular are susceptible to it because we have in general this mindset of like, we can just dig a little bit deeper and dig a little bit deeper. And that is coupled with our societal responsibilities where even women that are working outside of the home still carry the bulk of the household chores and the household mental load and also the caregiving. And so we are used to, like our conversation before we started was about how we both have like a million tabs open. And that is a visual representation of what's happening in our brains, I think, on a daily basis. So it happens little by little. And I think women are also very used to being self-sustainable. And so when we start to feel fatigued, when we start to feel tired, when we start to see some of those red flags, we will take a little break or do some sort of self-care that seems to make us feel better temporarily. But the underlying problem is consistent. And so you're just getting these little bumps of improvement, but the downward trajectory is where we are headed. And so when I say that I was on my way, I knew that I was burnt out from being in healthcare, but I also wanted to still see patients. I still enjoyed that part of it. And so I knew how I was feeling, but I didn't recognize what was happening and the why. I knew the what, but I didn't know the why. And I definitely didn't know the how of how to address it.
And I think as you're describing it, I can see like a grid in my mind of like, okay, that felt really nice, but I'm still on the decline. Like I can see the axis changing as you're speaking. And so I like that description because if we can all just look at it as that instant bump is usually what we go for. It's what can we do to feel really good right now? Or, could I sleep in today? And is that helpful? Sure. But like you said, it's not addressing things as a whole. You've created a burnout quiz. You've got a stress management on your website. I love that. It's like, I saw that. I'm like, I can just tell you. So I don't know if you have to take the quiz and sometimes what areas might be struggling there. But what are you seeing from women right now? Like when they take this quiz, when you're meeting with your folks, like what are they stressed out about today in today's world?
So it's interesting because a lot of my clients are in the like kind of over 30, getting into 40s and 50s. And so there was actually a study that was done that supports this, where it was published earlier this year in the journal Work. And they looked at women kind of over 40 and why they were burning out at such a high rate. And they attributed it to three main categories. One, that in the workplace, because burnout has traditionally been a workplace issue, but I see it transcending into life as well. And we can talk about that in a minute. But when you see it in the research, it is most likely in the context of work. So one, they are in roles that have a higher turnout or turnover. And so they are more susceptible to a lot of change at work, which makes it very difficult to get into a rhythm. And they're more susceptible to those changes in responsibilities and, kind of getting lost in the shuffle as people come and go. Okay. The second thing is they are, especially the women over 40, is they're in the perimenopause group. And so we are experiencing all of these perimenopause and menopause symptoms that as a medical system are not necessarily really addressed in a way that is matching the level that women are experiencing. I'm going to choose my words carefully here.
That makes sense. No, I completely, I'm tracking you.
Yes. And a lot of the perimenopause symptoms mimic burnout symptoms. The third thing is that we are part of what's called the sandwich generation. And we are caregiving still for our own children. And yet our parents are aging. And so we are also beginning to move into a caregiving role for them too. And so we are in this middle where the meat of the sandwich, where we are caregiving on both ends. And it's very, very draining. So I see a lot of those things. Most of the women that I work with are very successful professionals or small business owners or entrepreneurs. And so, they're not necessarily in that category where they're seeing a lot of the turnover, but those other two pieces are significant.
And even if they're not seeing the category from an employee level, a lot of times, even in that leadership role, there is so much change, that impacts us that we have to then turn around and figure out what to do and then execute it for other people to figure out how to change, right? So it's like it starts at the top a lot of times. And I can imagine that burden can be even greater. So I'm curious, what were the categories from the personal side and not work? You said that they had different areas. We want to know everything here about burnout.
So let's just talk a little bit let me just clear like three different terms that we use. Let me just clarify three different terms that are sometimes used interchangeably, but are very different. And then that will help us lead to that question. So We have stress, we have chronic stress, and we have burnout. And so oftentimes we think of those three things as interchangeable and we describe them as such. But the way that we experience them are very different. Stress, acute stress, is a normal physiological response. It is a response of our body to a stressful situation. So if you were, I'm in Rhode Island, we have 195 where all the crazies are driving. And so like if you're driving to work on 195, you get cut off. Yes. You get cut off, you white knuckle it, like your breathing increases, your heart rate increases, you might feel a little sweat. But then you respond and you return down to normal as soon as he passes or she passes. And so that's a normal response where like a very stressful situation, your body responds and then you come back to baseline. Chronic stress is when you have repeated small stresses or one big traumatic stress that your body can't recover from adequately. So if you're driving to work, you get cut off, you white knuckle it, you have that elevated stress response, but then you get to the office and all of a sudden there is a dumpster fire that you have to put out and this person isn't here today and there's a conflict between these two employees. And so you don't have time to recover. And so by the end of the day, you might have these periods like at lunch where you can unwind a little bit. But at the end of the day, your stress level is still net positive. And if you're not able to sleep and recover because of that high stress or because of any other issue, then you're not going to recover adequately. And what many of us do is we are at that point at the end of the day and we just want a glass of wine, or we just want a drink, or we just want a beer. And that's going to disrupt our sleep and make it even worse for the morning. So we have, and that's where like chronically over days, over weeks, over months, over years, we see that translate into chronic disease. We see that chronic stress has an increased risk of adverse cardiovascular disease, GI disorders, sleep disorders, mental disorders. Like you see the toll that it takes because our body just is on all the time. Burnout is very different. Burnout is an environmental issue. It is where you are put in a situation where you as a being your energy is being drained. And the way that that comes across is that you don't feel like you're being seen. You don't feel like you're being heard. Who you are does not seem to be appreciated or acknowledged. And so we see this in the workplace. And traditionally, when we had studied burnout, it was in caregiving roles, these high caregiving roles, nurses and doctors.
See that. Yeah.
And so when you look, this is what I mean when I say like it's totally transferable, because now you have this group of women who are doing all of those same things. And we see this in the language that we use sometimes. It doesn't matter what I do. You know, in the workplace, we say, I'm replaceable. People actually say that to you. Your employer might say that to you. You're replaceable. You're all replaceable. So what that means is that you don't bring any value that is being appreciated at all. You may be able to do your job, but so can that guy. And so can this guy.
And then you're just spinning your wheels. It's like it makes you feel like, why am I even doing this? If there isn't any value, they don't see. And nothing is more deflating than that. I mean, this mental energy you've spent, the time away from loved ones, you know, from what you want to do, and nothing is going to change by your contribution. Like that's a tough one. Yeah. I have to ask you though, Camilla, like you mentioned that sandwich generation who's caregiving now, like that, does that bleed over into this burnout piece because they become a caregiver in their own right, where, you know, mom and dad are like upset with you now because you're like managing them. The household is a little upset with you because your priorities are somewhere else. Like it becomes that thankless job.
Yes, very much so. But the other component that you don't necessarily see is like in this age bracket, in this professional age bracket, you're also really hitting your stride professionally. You know, you've been where you are for, you know, at least a decade or two at this point. And so that is high powered too. So you're at peak responsibility for that area, but then you have this personal responsibility. Both are important to you. You need both to have the life that you want, but how do you use the term that people use is, I feel like I'm spread so thin. And so how do you start recognizing where those kind of high energy sucking jobs are that are taking so much of your energy? And how do you set these boundaries that protect your energy and recognize that some of these aspects of your life you might need to recover a little bit more from than you are?
It's time for a quick sponsored ad from EMK Skincare. It's my skincare secret I swear by and love it so much, I bought the company. EMK was founded over 30 years ago in Beverly Hills and is crafted from science-backed research of human placenta and the bioidentical properties to placenta found in nature. High-potency, plant-powered formulas with clinically proven ingredients. Anti-aging is just not realistic, but healthy aging skin is. And it's why this brand is loved by dermatologists, plastic surgeons, estheticians for its healing ingredients and reduced downtime after procedures. It's my secret to glowing skin, even on my busiest days, my travel days, and my longest work days. Visit emkskincare.com to sign up for emails and receive 15% off your first purchase. Now back to the episode.
Camilla, can you give us some actionable takeaways on what we can do today to start identifying those? Is it really, what would you tell us?
So the key is to really bring some objective data to this very broad, kind of vague feeling that you have. And so the way that you do that is with assessing. Where we usually start is, you can do this right now. Just take a piece of paper out and you're going to just draw a line down the middle and make two columns.
So pro and con
yes,
list.
Yes, a variation of that. Yes. But instead of designating tasks or priorities, right? Because you can do that a million different ways. You want to start shifting that perspective and looking at things through the lens of your energy. And this is a very personal, you got to listen to your gut on this one. And it begins to bring you back into trusting your own intuition. And so instead of writing pros and cons, what you're going to do is you're going to write plus for charges and drains and for negative. And so you're going to look at the tasks that you have, and you can separate this out into work and life if you want to, but you're going to start recognizing what gives you energy and what takes energy away. And so I can give you an example. So for me, I run almost every day in the morning. It's my first business meeting of the day. It's non-negotiable. It sets the tone, and that gives me all of that as a huge plus. I also have a 4-year-old. Love him to death, would die for him, would kill for him, no problem. But yet, love of my life, joyful, all of those things, but is still 4 years old. And so, sometimes, and this is where it's not a measure of your commitment, it's not a measure of your energy. You have to recognize that sometimes on those days where he is pushing through a developmental milestone and it's a lot more challenging, you've got to recognize that was also very difficult for you, and do whatever you need to do to recover. And that's where you have your list of things that give you energy, because you can't necessarily set a boundary on parenting, but you can increase the positive aspects of your life to help balance it out. And so that's where really getting a sense of what works for you, and also where your energy drains are. It's an exercise in mindfulness, because with mindfulness, we talk about non-judgmental curiosity. And so approaching this with curiosity rather than shoulds and shouldn'ts, that is not anywhere near this exercise. The shoulda, coulda, wouldas. This is just absolute listen to your gut, what gives you energy and what doesn't give you energy. And I would also encourage you to think outside of the box of things that you might have lost along the way that you used to really enjoy doing.
That's a good tip, because it could be things that we haven't done them in a while because we don't have time. And it's you forget about the positive energy it brings, actually, because it's a thing of the past. Yeah, that's a great tip.
It's part of what you've sacrificed for where you are, but it may be something that comes back in a different way that can help balance out some of these other things.
I love that. Well, speaking of balancing out and positive contributions, let's talk mentorship. So tell us about someone in your life who's been influential to you from a mentorship perspective.
I was thinking about this question, and I have to say, this isn't really professionally, but the group of people that come to mind, not just today, but I think about them probably more than most people think about their high school teachers. But when I was in high school, our entire math department was women teachers. They were all female teachers. And I went to a small school, independent school in Maine. And so our classes were small, but these women, I will never forget them. And they were phenomenal. And it wasn't even a thing that we didn't have any male teachers in our math department. And this was before STEM was a thing. This was before anything, but they generated some incredible minds, both my classmates and me, just being themselves and working together, because we would see them working together. All of their classrooms were adjacent in the same wing of the school, and just witnessing it and having that be normal. It was never really extraordinary that any of the girls would go into engineering or would go into architecture
medicine
or anything like that, because these were our role models and these were our mentors that helped us with our SAT prep, that helped us with our AP prep. And so when I think about who is most influential, that group of women, Mrs. Sharon, Mrs. LeBlanc, I remember their names, Mrs. Delvecchio, Ms. Hansen, they were incredible. And I would only hope that everybody was able to have teachers like that just set the bar so high you didn't realize there was anything lower.
What I like about that, well, everything about it, but How did you take that to your practice when you started out in business and then when you went to college and when you're furthering your career? Like, how did you begin? Because that's all you knew. You didn't have the bureaucracy. You didn't have the big school district. No one's communicating. Everything's got to get approved. Like, no one's really there for you. You had this personalized feel to everything. So how did that play into your company?
It brings confidence because it's not exceptional. It's other women are in a position of leadership and power. And this is where it's so important to see people that look like you, that talk like you, that act like you in these positions of power, because it becomes something that is just normal. It changes that mindset of what is possible when you set the expectations at a level that are achievable. And I think just having that carried through, aside from just how they taught and how we had to think quantitatively and analytically and using critical thinking skills, but it really gave me the confidence that we can do this in a very male-dominated field, that we could do this.
Yeah, strength and confidence and knowing that you can. What advice would you give to women listening right now who are thinking about going into medicine or chiropractic or wellness careers, and how that space is for mentorship, what they can do to seek it and to give it themselves? Any advice for those out there?
It's a tough industry. It is a very difficult industry.
Speak freely.
Yes. It is one where you can make a lot of difference. You really can influence people's lives in a positive way, for sure. My suggestion would be to shadow as many people as possible. And what I found, I lost track of how many people I shadowed when I was looking at what direction to go in. But what I found is that most people are very open to just having you come in for an afternoon or a day and be able to just see what it's like. The advice that I give most young people is, when you are trying to choose a path, choose your lifestyle first. What is it that you want out of your life? Do you want to have your weekends free? Do you want to own your own business? Do you want to be able to travel? Do you want, to help people? And in what capacity do you want to help people? Like, what are the things that you are really good at doing that makes you unique? And so once you start kind of choosing that lifestyle, then you can choose how you want to use your special qualities and your education to fit into that. But what I see on the other end is a lot of people that have outgrown their career with their life. And it's tough to transition later in life. And you don't know what you want at 20, but you can start to think that way. You kind of understand whether you want autonomy, whether you want flexibility to travel, like what are the things that really you love. And if you can discover those early and hold on to them, then the rest of it will fall into place.
Great advice. Great advice. So you, speaking of early ages, you are guest lecturing currently. How exciting. So you've gone I love the transition into your career and your coaching life. But you're working with Brown University and sharing this stress and burnout and life choices with a group that are age range, early 20s, I'm assuming?
Yeah, so I do guest lecturing there periodically. And it's interesting because usually by the time I get them, they're like first or second year. So this isn't even really on their radar. Like, they're really just wanting to pass their next exam. But they also they do know that it's challenging. They do know that the field that they're going into is going to be physically, mentally, emotionally challenging for them. And so one of the things that we try to do is get them to understand that they can start putting some practices into place while they're in school, because that pressure to perform doesn't change. And so if you can find those ways and find those techniques that work for you to help manage that stress as you move along, then when you get out into the practice world, it's going to be that much easier to transition.
Did you have a course like this in school?
No.
I didn't either. Okay, so when did something like this become, is it just the times we're in where it's like we see the effect of stress and burnout and we want to get these kids, we want to get people equipped and ready I mean, I'll give you an example, Camilla. My son, he's in seventh grade, and they are heavily, like, they're training their brains to switch subjects and classrooms every hour, and they have to run their calendar and email their professors. And they have all of this autonomy and agency built into their days. And it's incredible. And I'm thinking, gosh, I didn't have that. I just learned to run my calendar, 5 years ago with precision.
Yeah.
With these, you're seventh grade and you're looking at your time blocks, And so the earlier we get to these people, the better. So when did this begin evolving at Brown and other colleges around?
So the program that I teach actually is out of Massachusetts General Hospital. And it's called the Stress Management and Resiliency Training Program. The Medicine Henry Mind Body Institute is part of Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. And so you see some of these programs. Our SMART program is one of them. There's another very well-known called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction that was designed by Jean Kabat-Zinn. That's usually when you're looking at research with meditation and it's a program, that's one of the programs that they use often for that. So if you read through the methods, you would see that MBSR. And so the reason why I chose the SMART program was because it was evidence-based and it had research behind it. So there is this movement towards that. And what we're seeing is that the stress component of physical illness is significant. So remember what we said about stress, chronic stress, and burnout. Chronic stress will lead to disease. And so when we're looking at lifestyle choices, which is what lifestyle medicine is all about, to help manage, stop, or reverse some of these chronic illnesses, managing stress and having a system and a routine down is paramount to helping everything else. And so our stress response system affects every single part of our being.
As well as longevity being such a hot topic right now. And we all want to live longer. We want to, but if we are living, we must add an asterisk. We want to be in perfect shape, very healthy, not on meds, right? Like we want it all. We want to be 200 years old and great skin. But this longevity piece and chronic stress is linked as well, right? I mean, it's one of the factors of, not living as long. And so those things are affecting us in so many ways. So I'm curious, as you have transitioned into coaching, how are you able to take the courses that you have, the clients that you currently are working with? What does the long-term look like for them? And I ask that because in the short term, you can help them figure out what's going on. You can help them implement a strategy. But what does it look like for someone a year or two down the road once they've evolved and identified? Are you finding that people are actually sticking with this, or do we revert back to the glass of wine at night and hope for the best?
So there's always going to be the low-hanging fruit, right? There's always going to be but the approach that I take is very similar to what I had in practice, which is you start with this acute episode, like they are there because they're in some sort of crisis or they see a potential crisis coming. And so our immediate goal is to identify the root fear, identify the root problem, and be able to give you tools and techniques and help you change into a better place. But long-term, the idea is to be able to give you those tools to be able to manage yourself. Because the idea here is that it's personalized and it's individual, and it's about learning about yourself and learning about your life and taking you out of that spinning a million miles an hour, slow it down so that you can actually look at it. And so over time, that stress can build up. But if you can recognize the red flags, and that's where, towards the end of it, that is one of the things that we do is say, okay, what are your red flags that you are looking for so that you can self-identify them? I will always be here to come back to help a refresher and to help just, give you that boost. I'm always going to be here, but we want you to be able to be self-sustainable here and be able to see for yourself, what are your unique triggers?
And that's a great goal, isn't it? I mean, that's what we all want, is to be able to walk away and take care of ourselves.
Yes, it is. It is.
Camilla, before I let you go, we ask all of our guests to text a friend and describe you. How would they describe you to our audience? Because we've had the pleasure of meeting you today, but I'd love to know what they have to say.
You can edit this part out, but Jake did not write me back.
And the rest... He's
failed me.
That's a Jake. We're We're going to do a special shout out to Jake. Well, I tell you what, I can already tell you are incredible. You are a highly focused, determined woman.
I can tell you what he would say, though.
What would he say? Let's go.
He would say that all of those things, that I am determined and motivated and very focused. He would also say that I am very funny, because I am actually very funny. I think I'm very funny. I make myself laugh and I make him laugh all the time. But I feel very deeply. And so that's one of my, one of my things. Well, it's a superpower, but also I have to be careful, because when you're working with people, and this is something I learned in practice, is how do you help people? And when I have clients that are coaches, this is one of the things that we work with, is how can you help people that are, that need from you and take from you, but protect yourself and not take on that emotional load, because that is also a skill. So that's something that I've had to work on myself, and not be such a people pleaser, but be able to recognize that if I get depleted, I can't help anybody. So that's part of the sustainability piece.
Camilla, what is your mentor moment that you want to leave our guest with today? It's what they're always going to be thinking about you when we think about Camilla Moore.
I think so. If I could leave you with one kind of pondering thought, it would be one of the pivotal shifts in my life was when I really began to decipher achievement from success. And when we are looking at our goals that we set and what we want to accomplish, those are achievements. But we need to be able to have a separate and distinct list of what determines our success. And success, it's much more introverted. It's much more personal. We can achieve these goals of, making high six figures, of making seven figures, but that is not going to fill you up as a human being. What is it in your life that you really look at as a success that you have been a part of? And being able to separate those two things make both of them easier to accomplish, because then you're not emotionally attaching to your achievements something that should be reserved for your success.
I love that. Beautifully said, Camilla. I'm going to be pondering that for the remainder of the day. And every time I listen to this episode, where can we all find you and follow you and support you?
Thank you. So the easiest place to find me is on Instagram. I'm on there every day. I will write you back, and I do a lot of really helpful tips on stress and burnout and anxiety and people pleasing and imposter syndrome, and all of those things that can factor into stress and burnout. That's the easiest place. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Dr. Camilla Moore is my Instagram handle, and just look for Dr. Camilla Moore on LinkedIn, and that's where I'll be.
All right. We'll find you there. Camilla, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And it was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Before you go, a huge thank you for being a part of this episode. I hope it left you with a spark of inspiration. And if you haven't already, hit that follow button and subscribe button to stay connected. Now is a great time. Your reviews are the heartbeat of our podcast. So if you enjoyed what you heard today, a review would really mean the world to us. Let's keep this conversation going as well on Instagram at Rani Alfers. Visit us at ranialfers.com for all episodes, show notes, and also to express your interest to be a guest. Please sign up. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, I'll see you back on Working Women Mentor.